Indy NXT was probably the most competitive championship that I had been a part of in my racing career. Being a race car driver has to be one of the most high-stress jobs. Your life is in your hands, and the life of the other guys on the track are in your hands too.
Sejam bem-vindos ao NXTcast. No episódio de hoje eu tive a oportunidade de conversar com um cara que é 7 vezes campeão da Trans Am. Venceu prova na Fórmula Regional Américas e na Superstar Racing Experience. E mais recentemente competiu na Indy NXT nas temporadas de 2022 e 2023, onde ele terminou o campeonato em 10º e 9º respectivamente. O convidado desse episódio é nada mais nada menos que Ernie Francis Jr, piloto do carro número 99 da Force Indy nas últimas temporadas. Ele nos contou um pouco sobre sua jornada no automobilismo e sobre a rotina de um piloto na Indy NXT. Espero que vocês gostem da nossa conversa. Yeah, so first, thank you for accepting my invite to come here. It's a pleasure talking to you.
No, it's a pleasure to be on here with you, for sure.
I would like to know, I would like to start knowing about your career. How did you get into racing? Who did motivate you to do it, and how it was started?
So I grew up in a racing family. From the minute I was born, my dad got me little race car toys. I had a race car bed growing up. My dad was a race car driver since the 80s. So I was always around the racetrack as a little kid. And when I turned 4 years old, he got me my first go-kart. And that was where the love started. Started racing go-karts when I was 4, and then started racing cars when I was 13. And it's just been a progression ever since then. But yeah, it's been pretty much, a lot of people say that racing's in their blood. Racing's like a family sport, but for me, it really was. Growing up watching my dad at the racetrack really gave me a lot of the inspiration to make me want to race myself.
Yeah, and now going for the next thing, you have like a really interesting story because you didn't start racing in open wheels. You have like a lot of touring cars background, and I would like to know, how did you end up going to the Indy NXT this past 2 seasons?
Yeah, the Indy NXT transition was interesting for me because for me growing up, I never thought that open wheel racing was going to be where I would ever race. Growing up, I was always in sports cars, touring cars, GT cars. But then, ended up doing a season of F3 in the U.S. Championship here. And then after I did that season, I got a phone call from Roger Penske asking if I wanted to be a part of their Force Indy program to race in Indy NXT with the hopes of racing into IndyCar. And when Roger Penske gives you a call and asks you to race for him, you say yes.
Yes,
So
for sure.
had to make the transition, had to learn how to drive something different, and it's been a really really fun journey for me.
And you talked about your family, and I would like to know, like, how much is a pressure to being a race driver, and how did you deal with it? Do your family help you with it, and how it goes?
Yeah, being a race car driver has to be one of the most high stress jobs that you can do. It is really intense. You have to perform the best that you can. You're going, 180, 200 miles an hour on some of these racetracks, and your life is in your hands, and the life of the other guys on the track are in your hands too. So there's a lot of pressure. It makes it pretty difficult. But having a good support system definitely helps out. Having my family, having my girlfriend, having friends that I can talk to. It just makes it easier on me. Not having to just worry about it all myself. But it's a lot of pressure. Trying to stay focused is a big thing, and I think that's one of the biggest things that drivers struggle with throughout their careers, and something that we all work on, trying to just stay focused and as mentally prepared as we can to be on the racetrack.
I think you touched on a point about the speeds and things, and a lot of people that don't know exactly how motorsports works think that drivers aren't real athletes. So for you, how important is the physical preparation? Because of course, the driver has a lot of stress in their body, and it can be really tiring.
Yeah, racing. It's funny when a lot of people say that drivers aren't athletes. Um, it's funny because they always think that you're just sitting down, just steering, just hitting the pedals. You're not doing anything. But when you're inside of a race car, it's 120 to 140 degrees. You're in a 3-layer racing suit, and most of these cars that we race have no power steering, no power brakes, so everything's manual. Your steering is super heavy. The best way that I could describe it is if you ever go rent some racing go-karts. You go to a go-kart track where you go and pay $20 to go do a few laps. You feel how hard it is to turn the wheel in a go-kart over the course of the 10 laps. You're completely tired. Your shoulders are burning. Now imagine doing that for an hour and 30 minutes at a time, and you're doing it at speeds of 160 plus miles an hour, while you're also at 120, 140 degrees in a three-layer suit. So I think race car drivers are athletes, and there's a lot of training that goes on behind the scenes to make sure you can perform at the highest level.
And as you said earlier, there's like a lot of pressure for you to deliver the results, and I think it's like one of the, as you said, like one of the most stressing jobs to have, like being a racing driver. And now going to the Indy NXT side, what's the difference? Because you said you have like a different background, you only raced in open wheels like F3, and how different was Indy NXT from other championships you raced before?
Yeah, Indy Next was probably the most competitive championship that I had been a part of in my racing career. All the guys that are racing in that field are at the highest level of the junior formulas in the U.S. Guys are coming through there from across the world to compete, and we're all fighting for a seat in IndyCar, which IndyCar is one of the most competitive fields in all of racing. Um, so all these guys are multiple race winners and champions of all different kinds of formula and different racing throughout their careers. So we're all very competitive, and you're not fighting for a second on the track. You're fighting for a tenth of a second or half a tenth of a second because the field's just that close. And that was just a big change for me being in such a competitive field, and then as well how fast the cars are and how much downforce the cars are or the cars have. They're they have way more downforce than anything I'm used to driving. So it's a different type of driving for me. You have to trust the air, trust that the car is going to stick to the track when everything in your head is telling you that it's not.
And yeah, you said it's such a competitive, and I would like to know like how do you prepare for this race? Like your training, and what's the most challenging about being getting prepared for this races?
Yeah, before each race, we'll have meetings with the engineer to go over, you know, things that we want to change throughout the testing, what ideas we want to test in practice to see what we can work on to make the car faster. We'll have track notes, driver notes from drivers that have raced there in the past. Maybe if we had raced there the year prior, notes that I had taken from that year ago. And then we also have the racing simulator that I'll hop on, run a few laps, familiarize myself with the track a little bit, just so I can get an idea of what I'm going into before I get there.
And also, like for a lot of people that will hear this podcast, they don't really know how it's how it happen, how the driver goes to the track and things. And I would like you to tell more about what's the routine of a driver in a race day. Like what you do. Do you have like some special things that you do before each race, and how it happens?
Yeah, for race weekends, it's all about just trying to be as focused as you can. Trying to eat right, trying to have a good breakfast. My girlfriend always gets on me about that. She makes me eat hard-boiled eggs every morning and bananas because if I don't, I'm in trouble. So she makes me eat all that good stuff before races. During the event, I have my own little rituals and things that I do. But me personally, I believe if I tell what those things are, that they don't work anymore. So I have my own little rituals and things that I do before a race weekend. But it's all about trying to just stay focused. I usually try to stick to myself and just try to be pretty quiet during race days. Just kind of focus on what I have to do. I'm usually a pretty funny guy, laughing, joking around. But during race days, I'm pretty serious. So just try to get as focused as I can for what I got to do.
And you are talking about your girlfriend and your family and how it's important to you. And out of the track, of course, because we said how stressing it is.
Mm-hmm.
What you do out of the track that in the race weekends and kind of things you don't like stress more than you have to. What
Yeah,
you do out
when
of
I'm
track?
outside the track, I like to spend time with my girlfriend, spend time with my friends. I'll go out on my jet ski. I live in South Florida, so we have perfect weather for that. So I'll go out with that. I have a car that I built that I drag race and stuff, so I work on that on the weekends. Just kind of things to take my mind off of my career. So I try to have a time where I'm focused on the racing, and then when I'm outside the track, I can take a break from it and just be a normal person.
Sure. Now that we are talking about you, like for people to know you better, I would like to ask him some questions, and I would start to what's your greatest memory about racing? Like the one that when you are like you don't have this all the motivation and remember like why you start doing this?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest memories that I have that was something that motivated me a lot to do it more was my first professional race that I had done when I was 15 years old. I went out there and won all three races of the weekend. It was in the World Challenge Series, racing the touring cars, and it was kind of like a little eye-opening moment for me there because it was like, holy crap! And we went out there and swept the whole weekend, and my first professional race, and it felt like, okay, this is something that I can do, and I just have to stick with it and try to make it happen.
And I also would like to know, we talked about like different types of circuits and different types of championships. We
Mhm.
talked like the difference between touring and open wheel cars, but the Indy NXT, like it has something that's different from other series that are the ovals. Had you competed before, and how was the experience?
Yeah, so I've competed on very limited ovals before I'd raced in Indy Next. I had driven in the K&N series, raced a few ovals there. I've driven a few late models on some ovals, but they were all stock cars, big, heavy NASCAR. So it's a lot different than the Indy Next car. The Indy Next cars on ovals are super fast. It has to be uh, probably the most stressful weekends we go to because you are flying around the tracks that we go at, and anything that goes wrong there, it's going to be a big one. But it's a lot of fun, and once you get used to it, it becomes some of the most fun weekends that we end up racing at.
We talked about the stress and all the danger that you guys go on.
Mhm.
This year you had a crash in the, I think it was free practice at Gateway, right?
Yep.
So how was this? And like it hurts, or how it feels inside the car?
Yeah, it's tough bouncing back from a crash like that. It was a crash in practice. Uh, got into the wall backwards, pretty hard hit. I think it registered like 40 G's on the G meter in the car, so it was pretty hard. It rings your bell for sure. The biggest thing is try not to think about it. You got to try to push it out of your mind a little bit because a few hours later, you got to be right back in the car to go and race. And if you're thinking about the crash that happened before, you're not going to be performing how you need to. Um, but yeah, it hurts, but you realize that it's all part of it. If you race long enough, you're going to have some crashes, so you just have to be able to bounce back from it.
Yeah, and earlier also you talked about going to simulator and testing things, and how
Mhm.
do you deal with it? Like because drivers that started that are in IndyCar nowadays, like 20 years ago, they didn't have all the technology to test before. And how do you deal with it? How what's your relation with this technology?
Yeah, I try to use it as much as I can because I think all the drivers coming up nowadays, the younger generation, they all use simulators so much. There's so much that we can rely on now with simulators, with data, video. You have so much more that you can go over than you could, even 10, 15, 20 years ago in racing. So it's a big tool that helps a lot. And I think if you don't use it, you're leaving yourself at a big disadvantage.
Like just some questions to close this thing up. Do you have like friends that you made in the motorsport world?
There's friends that you meet all across racing, guys that I have raced with, guys that I've coached, or guys that have coached me, people that I've raced against, and we're all competitors on the racetrack. But I think we have a bond off the racetrack that is something a lot different than what people will realize because we're out there with each other's lives in each other's hands, and I think that brings you closer together. So there's a lot of guys that I know that I've raced with over the years in Trans Am when I used to race there for a bunch of years that I can say are really close friends of mine. People that you know I trust racing next to at 180 miles an hour. So you can say I trust them with my life.
Yeah. And now the last two questions to end it is for the people that are hearing and like you and want to follow your career. For you, what are the next steps? What's your plan for your career, and what's your ultimate goal?
Yeah, so right now, I'm still evaluating what my plan is going to be for 2024. Working on plans to see where I'm going to end up racing. I think I'm going to end up doing something in sports car racing. So, back to where I was, where I'm used to racing, where I felt like I was always the best at. So going to keep working at that, but should be able to announce something hopefully within the next few months. You can follow along at my Instagram handle at Ernie Francis Jr. On my Facebook, Twitter, all with the same handle there. But yeah, that's the goal right there is to try to see what I can make happen for next year, and then my goal with my career is just be a professional race car driver wherever anybody will put me in a car. I've driven enough things now that I'm not very picky where I race. Racing's fun regardless. If they want to put me behind the wheel of a tractor and pay me to go race it, I'll go do it. So wherever I can go make a living racing cars, I'll do it for sure.
Yes, and for the last question, I would like to know if you met Ernie from like 10 years ago, what would be your advice for him?
The biggest thing I would tell Ernie from 10 years ago is just to stick with it. There's a lot of hard times that happen. Um, a lot of times where you feel like you want to quit or you feel like you're not good enough or you shouldn't be there. And the biggest thing I can tell myself is when you feel like that, just remember why you're doing it. Remember why you fell in love with racing in the first place, and to just stick with it because it's all going to work out in the end.
That's it again. Thank you so much. That has been a pleasure.
No, thank you.
Se você gostou do episódio, acesse o nosso site indynxtbr.jornalismop.com.br para conhecer e ficar por dentro do mundo da Indy NXT. Até a próxima!